All right, so I'm going to test a backend API. It's a simple API call that we're going to test. And before we get into that, I will just give you a primer on the feature that we are testing. So let's going to refresh this page. Basically, we have a box here. It's a field. And I can type in any stock that I want, Apple, for example, or any other stock, any other ticker, that is. And it'll give me a drop-down suggestion of stocks that match the name that I've typed in. So this is the functionality that we are going to test. And remember, we're testing the backend this time. So I already have a front-end test video for this about testing the form, which I've linked up top. But let's go ahead and test the backend. So we're going to test this API call right here. So to know which function we are testing, let's go back to our autocomplete React functional component first. Here it is. Now, when the user types in something, we are invoking this function right here. This is our API function. This function makes a call to our backend to get the results. And that is what we're testing right now. Search tradable symbols. So when this function gets invoked in our backend, this function gets invoked. Notice here, as part of Express.js, it is a handler for a request that is coming in. So a request comes in, we create the parameters that we need. We are using a third-party API, but regardless, we are calling our own function, fetch tradable symbols from search. This function is the backend function that we're going to be testing. So if I just were to go into this function right here, in fact, let me see if I can find a way to go into that. So get into the actions right here. Again, this function, all we're doing is we are passing in a URL. We are making a GET request to that URL with the parameters that we have created right here, recall, and that's that. So I want to test this API call, and I'll show you how to structure such a test. So I have this file here. It's called fetch from search.test.js, and what we're doing is we are doing a test. Now I'll show you how this works. Within a describe block, this is all just the function of how we set up our tests, by the way. And we're using Mocha in this particular scenario. But within this block right here, we have essentially what we're doing is, and I'll get into this before and after stuff later. But what we're doing is we are first testing whether it makes the fetch, whether it fetches the tradable symbols. So what we are doing is we are first stubbing that function. Stubbing, all stubbing means is we are forcing down this function down a particular path. That's it. It's kind of like a mock, but not really. What we're doing again is we are forcing it down a specific path. We are specifying an implementation for it such that upon the implementation, we can test for other behavior. I'll show you what I mean. So we have stubbed our API call. And then from there, we have mocked the startup of our server. We are now listening to a GET request. And from there, we are expecting it to return a status code of 200. Now, why is that? Well, because I've already stubbed it right here to return a response, to return some kind of array of objects. I have stubbed it to return that. Therefore, I should expect a 200. I should expect its body, the request's body field, to equal whatever response that I am giving it. And that's that. And I expect this function that we stubbed to be called once. Now, if it doesn't make sense, let's get into the actual functionality that we are testing. Once again, right here, we are invoking our function that we are testing. Note, fetch tradable symbols from search. That exact text is what you'll find right here. That is the function that we have stubbed. We are making it return some structure that has inside it data and a response field to that. That's what we have. So what we're saying is if we have stubbed this function to return something, first of all, I want to see a status code of 200, and I want to see the data field of the request equal to whatever it returned. That's that. Remember, all I'm doing here is I'm testing for whether, based on a successful returning of this function that I've stubbed, are all the other things working as expected. This is more so an integration test. It's not nearly a unit test. It's more so an integration test. We are saying, are we returning a 200? Is the response body being set appropriately? And is the function that we are stubbing, is that even called? That's what we're doing. This is the success scenario. Moving on, this is the failure scenario. So throw. If this function that we are stubbing throws an error, if it fails for whatever reason, well, in that case, I expect to return a 500, and that's that. And expect it to be called once as usual. Going back here, right? If this fails, we go into our catch block, and we hit a 500, and that's that. We don't send anything. So this is what the functionality is, and this is what we are testing it to be. That's that. Going back up top here, I said I will get back to this before each, after each. All this is saying is that before each one of these it blocks runs, I want to create a sandbox here. Now, don't get too caught up in what a sandbox is. It's really not a big deal. We're using sign-on in this case. Sign-on is just a library for creating mocks and spies and stubs, but you can use Jest, you can use any other library you want. But the point here is that before each test and after each test, I am creating and restoring all of my, let's call it environments right now. This is less important. This is more domain specific. Don't worry about this here. All I want to drive home in this video is that to test a simple API call, we're performing in this case something closer to an integration test where once the function that we are testing, that we are stubbing returns what we want it to return, we're testing for whether all of the other parts are acting as expected, and that's that. So one more thing, because we are depending on a third-party API, we are not verifying whether the API works. That's not the point here. That's not our job. Our job is not to verify whether the API returns 10 items when we specify 10 and 11 items when we specify 11. That's not our job. Our job is to test what we can control and what we have written. And again, what we have written is this code right here, where I am getting something, and once gotten, I am sending back the .data part, the field of that, to the response, setting it 200. This stuff is what we are testing right here. So, hope that makes sense. Just a simple setup of a backend test. And once you have this framework down, you can basically test for any sort of API call on the backend that you're making. And let's go ahead and see this in action. So if I were to just go to my terminal here and I'll just clear this out, you'll see now I'm going to just run my server tests, my backend tests, and you see two of them are passing. Should fetch and throw. The success scenario and the false scenario. Hope that makes sense. Hope this video helps. That's that.